Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast Top 10. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's get to the countdown.
In IT SPARC Cast Top 10, we go through the top 10 things, events, or people in a specific category. We then give you the details that you might not know with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors.
Oh, this was a tough one.
This was a tough one because in today's episode, we're starting our first two-parter. We wanted to cover the top 10 most influential pioneers in IT that you have never heard of, and we couldn't narrow it down to 10. So we built a top 20.
And you get to fight about this in the comments, too.
You do get to fight about this in the comments. And instead of making you listen to 20 all at once and taking up an hour and a half or however long that might take, we're broken up into two parts. So today we're going to cover 11 through 20, and the next time we'll cover 1 through 10. Now, as Lou mentioned, I'm quite sure many or some of you at least will disagree with our ranking system. Matter of fact, even Lou and I don't fully agree on exactly how these all ranked up, because we've ranked them from least impactful to most impactful on the world of IT today. So if you don't agree, or if you want to change the order just a little bit, either way, send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com or hit us up on X @ITSparkcast. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. We read every single piece of feedback we get, and we respond to most. Now, I can already hear the keyboard warriors out there ramping up saying, what about Grace Hopper? What about Bill Hewlett? Those were all very influential people, agreed, but they also got some notoriety, and many people have already heard of those people. The people we're talking about got less notoriety, and while you may have heard of some of these people, we guarantee that there are people on this list that you did not hear about, and most people haven't heard of any of them.
There are people on this list I hadn't heard about.
That is true.
But I'm going to start with what I consider a really good border case, because unless you dig into this, you may not know this one. But it's really interesting. So number 20 on our list, and one of the reasons why we stretched it, I think, as much as we did, is because we ran into so many good, like, this was foundational but never quite broke the thing, was, believe it or not, Hedy Lamarr. And Hedy Lamarr is, who's Hedy Lamarr? Hedy Lamarr was an actress, right? But she was also a really, really smart individual. So she was the entire package, brains and beauty. She was born in 1914 in Vienna, Austria, initially gained fame as a film actress in the 30s and 40s, showing early signs of technical curiosity. So this was a very big outlier in that time frame, right? You might have been, as a lady, interested in this stuff. You didn't show it. Inspired by early radio and telecommunications technology and by scientific luminaries working on wartime communication. So her impact on IT, believe it or not, was co-invented frequency hopping spread spectrum in 1941 with composer George Antheil. So the story is that she was at a piano, playing a piano with this composer, and she thought, okay, if I press this one key, and I have something that just listens for that one key, and then I play the entire piano, I can send a message with just that one key while I'm sending a bunch of other messages. Or either, like with digital communication, just brand new at that time, each one of those keys could be a digital communication. That laid the foundation for the concept of spread spectrum. And it was patented during World War II, and they did initial inventive groundwork on this for the U.S. Navy to control torpedoes. The Navy had come up with another way. They were further along, but really it laid the groundwork for secure communications, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and GPS. Her contributions are less well known in the IT circles than in entertainment, which is why we really like to call her out here. Yet it underpins much of today's wireless communication infrastructure. So after she had this breakthrough, she continued with her acting career, maintained a keen interest in technical innovation, although she did not pursue technology full time. She was doing fine as an actress, right? Her invention was largely ignored by the US military at the time due to secrecy requirements, but later became recognized as a foundational breakthrough in wireless communication. And Hedy Lamarr passed away in the year 2000, but I remember personally, IEEE did a big to-do about this for her. And she was posthumously celebrated as not just a film icon, but also pioneering inventor whose work helped shape modern wireless technology. That was, what an achievement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that I've been very happy, and then I'll talk about the kind of the less happy part I've been seeing recently over the last several years on things like International Women's Day and things like that on LinkedIn and on X. We'll see Hedy get mentioned and for her accomplishments as somebody that really has helped modern technology evolve. Unfortunately, on some occasions, she gets mentioned out of context as one of the inventors of Wi-Fi. And then that starts arguments and that she didn't invent Wi-Fi, and it really diminishes her accomplishments. So, as an engineer, I always like to remain accurate and get my information out there correct. So I try not to get into the middle of those arguments, but make sure you understand what Hedy did and promote her for what she did, because it is very beneficial. We all benefit shit right now. I have multiple devices that are on Wi-Fi, and they wouldn't be without the technology that she developed. But again, let's not diminish what she did by misstating it.
And honestly, let's think about some other things that were impacted by this technology, like DSL and modems. We do this in audio communication technology and near field stuff as well. So that was a hell of a conceptual breakthrough. Shall we go on to number 19, please?
Number 19, Niklaus Wirth. So Niklaus Wirth was born in 1934 in Winterthur. Has not a lisp. It's Winterthur, Switzerland. And he showed early interest in mathematics and engineering. He studied at the Swiss Federal Institute for Technology, also known as ETH Zurich, during the 1950s, where he developed a rigorous approach to computer science. He was influenced by early computer science research and the need for more structured programming methods. Keep in mind, early programming techniques, there was a lot of assembler out there, a lot of really unstructured code, and there was a big move towards things. COBOL was designed to try to create some structure around programming languages and things like that. And he saw this move and didn't feel that they were going the right way. And as somebody who took a COBOL class in college, I agreed that was not the right way to go at all. So he really felt that he needed to draw inspiration from the field of algorithmic design and software engineering and really do something with that. So he designed the Pascal programming language, which was released in 1970. And it then became the standard for teaching programming, and it influenced later programming languages such as Modula, Oberon, and even aspects of C, and obviously from there, C++ and C#, and other languages that followed from there. His work on language design promoted structured programming and clear syntax, which is crucial for the advancement of education and commercial software development. So we don't want to understate the impact here. While Pascal itself didn't ever become a major player in the software development front, I mean, people did use it and did release commercial applications with it. It never reached the heights of C, C++, Java, and others. I took it in college. Lou took it. It was instrumental to teaching the fundamentals of programming language. And I don't think I would have learned as much if it wasn't for Pascal.
I got to tell you, one of my memories on this, why I ended up taking this as a programming language, was I was taught that there's one correct way to do something in Pascal. And there's 5 ways to do it in C. And if you learn on Pascal and learn how to do it the correct way, that you will do a better job of programming in C, because even though there's other ways to get it done, there is a better way to get things done. And I think that is one of the reasons that you should still study a different language before you jump into C. And I've written assembler programs as well. This was anybody who's in on the earlier days of programming knows about Borland, right? And Borland's Turbo Pascal was the pinnacle. That was really, really good. So what happened to this guy?
So he continued his research and continued teaching at ETH Zurich. He authored many influential textbooks and papers on programming language theory. He did develop other follow-on languages such as Modula and Oberon, which we mentioned earlier, that explored the modular nature of programming and system design concepts further. He is currently retired from active teaching, but remains emeritus professor at ETH Zurich. His legacy lives on through influential languages and his widespread use of Pascal in computer science education. And again, Pascal is still taught in many forms to help teach the modern programming techniques. So thank you, Niklaus, for
thank you very much. That was a really good one. Well, let's talk about number 18, shall we?
We shall.
This one's near and dear to my heart because it is a doctor by the name of Claude Shannon. Dr. Shannon is famous for Shannon's Law, and we'll get into that in just a second. He was born in 1916 in Michigan, demonstrated an early aptitude for mathematics and electrical tinkering, which at that point meant, don't put your thumb on this or you'll die. So he went to the University of Michigan and later to MIT, developing a strong foundation in electrical engineering. He was influenced by the early work in electrical circuit theory and communication, as well as his time at Bell Labs. This is a theme you're going to see a lot of in these. Bell Labs was a hotbed of innovation. Absolutely crazy amounts of advancements came out of Bell Labs, and he was definitely one of the notable ones. In 1948, he published a mathematical theory of communication establishing the field of information theory. So he laid the foundation for data compression, error detection, and correction, and the digital communication systems used modern computing and telecommunications ever since, right? So there's something called Shannon's Law, and Shannon's Law is about how much information you can get through relative to the noise floor, signal to noise ratio, right? What is signal and what is noise? And we spend a lot of time, well, most people who've never played around deeply in engineering and circuit design don't realize we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's the signal, what's the noise. And the more you boost the signal, the more you boost the noise floor, which can impact other processes. So he had a seminal theory on that really was huge. He continued working at Bell Labs, influencing telecom and cryptography, early digital circuit design. Like I said, early digital circuit design, when I went through my circuit design, still one of the big problems, even with 5-volt logic at that point, is it a 1 or is it a 0? Because you don't get 5 or 0. You get like 2.8. Is 2.8 a 1? I don't know. Depends on the circuit. So really a challenge, right? He authored numerous research papers, shaped the future of communications technology, and he passed away in 2001. Left quite an interesting legacy. His theories remain integral to modern data transmission, storage, and encryption. There was word a couple years ago that Ericsson might have come up with a communication system that beat Shannon's Law. That could operate in a very noisy environment and still get a huge amount of data across. I don't know if that ever got followed up or some government agency came and went, mine, and it went black. But it was really, really interesting stuff. The cool thing about these people is they're hugely influential, but you should try to make their work irrelevant if you can.
Sure.
Right.
I just want to read one of the notes here specifically and just read it out loud because we're talking about the 40s. And his work laid the foundation for data compression, error detection, and correction in the 40s. I mean, this is seminal stuff that we take for granted today, but nothing we do today would work without data compression, error detection, and correction. It just wouldn't, right? It's so fundamental to broadcasting data over wire or the air, to the way memory works, to the way storage works, to everything that we do. It's just amazing. So huge impact here.
Yeah,
and he's
Shannon
only number
was amazing.
18. Wait till you see the rest of them.
What a freaking A. And well, okay. On that note, why don't you take us to number 17?
You got it. So number 17 is David Parnas. So David was born in 1941 in Calgary, Canada, and he developed an early passion for engineering and mathematics. Sounds familiar. Matter of fact, a couple of these things sound familiar to my previous entry, although his birthplace was different. Maybe just as cold, though. He studied at the University of British Columbia, where his academic work began to focus on software and systems engineering. He was really influenced by the early challenges of software reliability, again, sounding familiar, and the need for systematic design principles in computing. And he was motivated by the failures of ad hoc programming methods in early computer systems. So we mentioned that before, that these older computer systems, there really wasn't very much structure, and that led to a lot of problems, especially as programs were getting bigger and bigger. So what he did is he pioneered the principles of modularity and information hiding. So as we were doing the research on this, we were trying to figure out what information hiding meant. And that's actually,
what was that?
In quotes, was information hiding. He authored influential papers that argued for structured software design, laying out the groundwork for modern software engineering principles that's used in virtually all large-scale software systems today. So what he did, what information hiding is he argued for modularity. So procedures, what we now use as part of object-oriented programming, structures, all of these things, where it used to be that your code was linear and whatever you did next was just lined up one after another. So the fact that you can have procedure calls, libraries, all of these things that hid the function away from you. So now I just made a call to another procedure to a library.
Wait.
Yes.
I mean, I get to blame this guy for DLLs?
You can blame him for DLLs. Sure. Dude,
Can we
DLLs
put
are
him
great.
on our list?
I did put them on the list. I love DLLs. I've written DLLs. DLLs are awesome, man. So you could have a good API without DLLs. They're the foundation of many different great programming languages, or programs, I should say. But this idea became the foundational principle for designing robust, adaptable software, and is now cited in virtually every software engineering textbook. So this is great. After this, he became a professor at McMaster University in Canada, where he continued his research into system design and mentored many future leaders in software engineering. He then consulted with industry and contributed to the development of standards in systems architecture and software design. And he still remains active in academia and as a speaker in the field of software engineering, and his ideas continue to shape best practices in system design.
So you're not safe from him yet.
You're not safe from him yet.
Actually, I can't even imagine doing software without this.
No, I couldn't. I mean, my very first program was in BASIC, and it was line numbered. And I knew at that time, like, if I get beyond 100 lines of code, what am I going to do? How am I going to read this? And this was the solution to it. And, to have procedures and subroutines and function calls and all of the things, then learning about going from C to C++ and object-oriented and inheritance, we wouldn't be able to do inheritance of object-oriented without having the modularity that comes from, I'm using air quotes for those of you not on video, of information hiding.
And I remember this was hugely controversial at the time. I remember this debate coming up, and, because everybody was writing, BASIC was really hot because it ran all over the place. There were still a couple of weirdos doing things completely in assembler, which if you've ever done assembler, you'd realize it's like building a house by first building the brick by first digging out the clay, right? It's very, very intensive, but if you're good at it, you can really get tight programs. You can run a very small amount of space. So that was the big push against this, if I recall, was resources. And I think he and others at that time were arguing that resources were increasing so quickly. Moore had come up with Moore's Law right around that time, that we can ride Moore's Law up and disintermediate some of this stuff. So this was huge. This was absolutely huge. Do you want to hear about number 16?
Let's do it.
You might not want to, but it's okay. I'm going to tell you anyway. So number 16 was Bob Taylor, who was born in 1932 in West Virginia. and grew up with a strong interest, engineering and technology. If you're in West Virginia, that may have been mining technology, which is pretty hardcore, actually. Studied engineering at the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, in the 50s, gaining a practical grounding in electronics and computing. At that point, 50s, electronics and computing were head-to-head. There wasn't computer science at that point. You were basically an electrical engineer putting together valves or tubes, going to transistors in the early 60s. So he was influenced by the post-war boom in research and development in the US and by early computers like ENIAC, right? It used to be you custom built your computer to run a specific type of workload. And he was inspired by the idea of interactive computing and the potential to revolutionize business and science with technology. So he played a crucial role at ARPA in the early 60s, helping to conceptualize and drive the development of ARPANET. You ever heard of ARPANET? Okay, if you haven't heard of ARPANET, we wouldn't be doing this right now and torturing you if it wasn't for ARPANET, right? It was the precursor to the internet. Later at Xerox PARC, once again, another famous institution, in the 70s, he championed the development of personal computing and network systems that led to innovation, such as the Alto and the graphical user interface. His leadership and vision were pivotal in the transition from batch processing to interactive network computing. I don't think folks really get how much of a pivot that was. It used to be that if you had a programming job, like if you were in early programming, you would submit your job to a mainframe. It would go into the PBS or the batch scheduler, and then the mainframe would run your job. And if you had errors, God help you, because it had to go back. You had to resubmit everything, try to figure out where it broke, resubmit everything, usually via punched cards, into this batch queue again. So this was one of the big people. Bob Taylor, Bob, thank you, right? Interactive computing. It used to be amazing. Some of the old systems, I know people who learned Pascal on mainframes where it was all PBS, right? It was all batch systems. His vision was huge. And and after this breakthrough that sort of was Xerox PARC and such, he continued leadership roles in research orgs, becoming a key figure in venture capital for the tech companies in Silicon Valley. And I would argue, we mentioned earlier, if you go back to our top 10 networking companies that are no longer in business, there was a huge shift from the East Coast to the West Coast in the early days. He's one of the reasons, because it was venture capital. There's going to be arguments between MIT and Stanford forever. They're both top-notch places. Be happy to go to get a graduate degree. Really, really smart people in both places. But I think the reason that the Silicon Valley won out was twofold. One is better weather. No, hands down, no contest, right? Yeah. But number two, availability of capital. And it's still a huge problem. And this is one of the people that really helped bring that about. And that's whole big boom. I would argue his contributions as a VC in venture capital were as impactful as what he did in the other places. And he remained an advocate for innovative research and played advisory roles in several transformative technology projects. So he's like one of the hidden hands. And he passed away in 2017. His work laid the groundwork for modern internet and personal computing, leaving an indelible mark on technology. Probably never even heard of it.
That's a big deal. And he was, again, only number 16 on our list. So, yeah. But still a big deal. We're not trying to diminish what he did.
Oh, no, number 16 big deal. List. Right, a big deal. Well, why don't you bring us into number 15, please?
All right, let's do it. Number 15 is Christopher Strachey. Christopher was born in 1916 in England, and he grew up during the interwar period between World War I and World War II with an early focus on mathematics and logic. So keep in mind, at this point, there wouldn't have been the ability to study computing or anything along those lines.
That's true,
But he did study mathematics at the University of Cambridge in the 1930s and developed strong theoretical foundation in computation and logic. So he was influenced early on by the early computing theories from pioneers like Alan Turing and Alonzo Church. And his academic environment at Cambridge exposed him to the early development of informal language theory and the nascent field of computer science. So he made seminal contributions to the programming language design and operational system concepts from the 50s and 60s, and helped develop early theories for time-sharing systems and influential ideas around process management and resource allocation.
Wow.
His work laid the computational foundations later realized in more practical systems such as Unix and distributed OS design. So, really just laying those foundations. Again, we're talking about process management. We're talking about resource allocation. On the surface, those sound like little things, but when you think about it, they didn't exist at one point. Like, you had monolithic computer systems, they could do one thing at a time, but as they got more and more power, and you needed to be able to do time sharing, you need to be able to have them run multiple tasks, to the point that today, we're sitting in front of computers that are running multiple screens and running, video capture and audio capture and broadcasting out to the internet and all these other things. None of that would be possible without that type of technology. So he continued his academic research in computing and served as a professor, influencing generations of computer scientists. He authored influential academic papers that remain reference studies for programming languages and operation system designs today. He did pass away in 1975, although his name is not widely known outside of academic circles. His ideas continue to influence modern computing and the study of language theory in computer science. So again, big thank you to Christopher Strachey.
And if I talk about it, so I was at a place when Linus Torvalds, an individual you probably know about, the founder of Linux, came and gave his first talk at the Linux user group in the United States. It's when he came over to work in Transmeta, and he walks into this meeting, and which at that point they were being held at Cisco. So I just walked from one building to the other to get to him, which was really convenient. He said, "Hi, I'm here. You guys know who I am. I'm not going to give you a broad overview of everything going on Linux today, because I don't care. I only care about 64,000 lines of code that sit next to the kernel, and that's on multitasking." That was the foundational theory for that. And he spent the next hour talking about multitasking and how hard it is, the task switching algorithms. Folks who don't get into this, I mean, we use this stuff every day. Right? If you're running Unix, if you're running Windows, right? Task switching and preemptive multitasking and stuff, that all came about from this theory. So, and the intricacies of it are, there's still major fights going on over the best way to do this. And
let's move on to number 14, Lou.
Number 14 would be Gary Kildall. And Gary Kildall, you may or may not have heard of. I grew up in the Valley, so I did. But he was born in 42 in Seattle, Washington, developed an early interest in compute and electronics in high school, studied at the University of Washington in 1960s, where he became fascinated with operating systems and programming languages. So he was influenced by early mini computer revolution and emerging ideas of microcomputers during the 60s and 70s. So it was really a hotbed, right? The first microprocessor that we know of came out of Intel. It was the 4004. Right, which led directly to the 8080. And these were the big things. Around that point, Zilog came out with their Z series. You had Motorola come out with a 68,000. All this stuff, TI had I think it was the 6513. There was a bunch of chips out there. Most of the stuff was 8-bit. And he was right in the thick of it. And he was drawn to the potential of making computing accessible to a broader audience through efficient operating systems. So he developed CP/M, which is incredibly important. And it laid the foundation for the concepts that were included in MS-DOS. There was a big legal kerfuffle over this because MS-DOS essentially copied a lot of things that he did. And it became the de facto standard for early personal computers, setting the stage for the software industry and personal computing revolution. CP/M was the game in the early days. And after this breakthrough, he continued in computer science, exploring other operating systems and concepts in commercial software but none of them reached the impact of CP/M. And remained active as a consultant and advisory roles tech industry through the 80s, when it was all about the personal computer, right? Unfortunately, we lost him in 1994. His legacy endures in the fundamental design, personal computing operating systems in the early microcomputer revolution. I cannot imagine what he would think of where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think some people realize what computers were like in 1974. And if you think about like the Altair and
Oh my God, I was going to say the Altair.
Right.
How did you enter a program in the Altair?
So I actually never even got a chance to touch an Altair. So I was a little bit too young in that time frame. So this made a computer usable to a human that did not have a pocket protector and 3 PhDs in engineering. So
if I want to answer your question, by the way, if you didn't spring for like an interactive method to do it with the Altair, 16 switches.
Right.
You would load the bits, verify them on the LEDs, load, click, 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 load. And if you screwed up,
start all over.
You could dump the line. If I remember correctly, you could dump the line and start over. But if you realize you screwed up and you were 3 or 4 lines down, you're hosed.
Yeah. Now just picture that for those of you working at home here, especially if you're not on the video, but we're literally talking about switches going across, and you would flip those on or off, and that's how you programmed the computer. So think about it as a kind of an interactive punch card where one line at a time you flip the bits, and then you hit load that line, and then you loaded the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and that's how you program that computer. Wow. And then somebody comes along with an operating system where you could type in commands. Kind of a big deal.
It was a really, really big deal. So thank you, Gary. Would have been hosed without you, but it was a much bigger deal. A lot of this was theory, but day to day. Thank you, Gary. What's number 13?
Number 13 is Ted Nelson. Ted was born in 1937 in New York, and he developed strong interest in literature, philosophy, and science. So this is a little bit of a departure from our previous entries here. This gave him a very unique interdisciplinary foundation. He studied philosophy and mathematics at Swarthmore College and later at Harvard in the 1950s and 60s, blending technical and humanistic interests. So he took on studies in, I'm going to misspell this or mispronounce this word, I know it. It's semiotics, literature, and the emerging ideas of computer-mediated communications. He was inspired by those early concepts in computing and information theory, which led him to imagine new ways of linking and organizing data. So I wonder what that might mean. He coined the term hypertext.
Have we ever used that for anything useful?
And so in 1965, years and years and years before this ever became a thing, he was already envisioning this as something he called Project Xanadu, which was an early attempt to create a global interconnected digital library. And as we know, that the web and hypertext was originally released as a way to distribute textbooks because textbooks were expensive. And this was the precursor to that. So his ideas on linking documents predate and helped inspire the later development of the World Wide Web, even if Project Xanadu itself never materialized. So after this, he continued to advocate for open information systems and hypermedia through writings, lectures, and continued work on Xanadu. And then he remained active in research and conceptual work, influencing a generation of computer scientists, even while his own systems remained a niche project. He still remains active as an author and speaker. He contributes to discussions on hypermedia and digital information architecture, and his ideas continue to fuel debates in digital publishing and information systems. Talk about influential. So
really, and I would argue we haven't really got to Xanadu yet. I mean, we really haven't.
Yeah.
We've got Wikipedia, but Wikipedia's got problems. We all know that. And we have like this media we're coming to you over, which I think is proportionally important as something like a Wikipedia. Crowdsourcing knowledge is really interesting, especially when we can bring in our individual experiences, because we were there for some of it. And then you see sort of the social media that's characterized more by X and Facebook, that's still an interactive search to try to find the truth or just hork somebody off. I would argue that Xanadu should maybe have included that. Still have a ways to go yet.
All right. Why don't we move on to number 12?
Number 12. And think about the heavy hitters we've talked about so far. So, and these aren't even the top 10, which is amazing. And these are all people that I would be more than happy to interact with and have a beer with or whatever. Number 12 would be Ivan Sutherland, born in 1938 in Hastings, Nebraska. Developed an early interest in math and engineering during his school years, right? He was a geek, let's face it. Geeks did this. Studied electrical engineering and computer science, earning his PhD from MIT in the early 60s. So that's getting in on the ground floor. You're talking about at the point where people are starting to think about doing things like OS 360 and the mainframe, all that stuff. That was really the hotbed. And MIT was one of the hotbeds because the concept of personal computing really came out of there, mostly because the train club got access to the mainframe for the military. Fun story if you ever get a chance to research it. He was influenced by early graphical computing and engineering work on human-machine interaction, which was definitely something MIT was and is still known for in the MIT Media Lab. Inspired by projects like Whirlwind Computer and early experiments in computer graphics. So graphics was definitely his thing. In 1963, created Sketchpad, a revolutionary interactive graphics program that allowed users to draw directly on a computer display, right? We take that for granted. I would imagine it used a light pen at that point. It would have had to.
Yeah.
And it laid the foundation for computer-aided design, CAD, and graphical user interfaces, which are integral to modern IT and engineering. Nobody had thought to do this before this. Continued his career at institutions like BBN Technologies and eventually at Microsoft Research, shaping fields including computer graphics, virtual reality, and human-computer interaction. Authored several influential research papers that continue to be cited, computer graphics and visualization. Pretty much, if you're talking about using graphics, graphical user interfaces, yes, there's been a lot of theory. There was the Xerox PARC, mother of all demos, all this stuff. Really, a lot of this stuff that we do now grew out of Sutherland's research. How do you actually interact with this stuff? We had a lot of theory, but a lot of where the metal comes together could be put directly on Dr. Sutherland here. And he is an emeritus of several academic institutions, remains a highly respected figure, computer graphics and interactive systems. His early innovations continue to inspire current technologies, visualization, and design. Wow.
Big hitter right there.
No kidding.
And we're only at
I
number
can't
12.
even give you, I've seen light pen based systems, some of the stuff he had to work on. So just so people realize this, do you know how a computer light pen worked? Basically, you would get the CRT sweeping and the pen would sense when the CRT swept past it.
Right.
And from that, it could determine the location on the display.
Yeah.
And that stuff was very analog.
Very analog. That's actually how the old light guns worked on like the Nintendo, old Nintendo game systems. This is why those don't work today on LCD.
Yeah, they won't work on the LCDs. We had an Odyssey 2000 video gaming system that used that.
Nice.
One of the first. It was the first modular video game system with the plug-in cartridges.
Yeah.
And we were too cool for Pong.
Nice.
Thank you, Dr. Sutherland. Holy crap. You want to talk about another big one?
Absolutely. So number 11 is Alan Kay. So Alan Kay was born in 1940 in Springfield, Massachusetts, just about an hour from where I live right now. And he developed an early interest in science and literature and read widely from an early age. He earned degrees in mathematics and computer science in the 1960s, immersing himself in the world of computing. He was influenced by early research in object-oriented programming and the desire for computer systems that was accessible and educational. He was also inspired by the researchers at Xerox PARC and his reading on educational theories and system design. He conceived of the Dynabook, and we talked about the Dynabook in episode 1 of our top 10 list of top 10 technologies that are older than you think. And this was a concept in the early 70s and was a visionary idea for a portable graphic learning tablet computer in the early 70s. He also co-developed just small things like object-oriented programming concepts while he was at Xerox PARC, which later influenced things like Smalltalk and, from its extensions, languages like Java and C++. So the ideas that he put forward helped shape the design of modern personal computers, tablets, and interactive educational tools, as well as the programming language that many people use today. He continued to do research at Xerox PARC and then later at Apple, Microsoft, and other institutions as an advocate for better interface design and educational computing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. He authored numerous papers and books that continued to influence computer science and human-computer interactions. He now remains active in research in academia and is widely regarded as a pioneer whose visionary concepts continue to influence the design of computing devices and software.
Absolutely huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan Kay.
Yeah,
that is going to cover this episode. We want to thank you. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We want to hear from you and what do you think? We would say normally at this point, did we miss somebody? But wait until our next episode where we get to person number 1 through 10, because we definitely missed 10 people, but we want to hear what you think. Is there another topic you want us to cover? Is there another top 10 list you want us to investigate? After you watch episode 2 of this series, where we cover people 1 through 10, then tell us if we missed somebody. You can send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback@itsparkcast.com, or hit us up on X at IT SPARC Cast. If you're on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. We read every single piece of feedback we get, and we respond to most. Please hit like and subscribe and turn on notification. That's really going to help this channel grow. If you feel that you're getting great information from us and it's entertaining, please tell your friends and colleagues about us so they can get the same information that you are getting. And with that, we're going to turn you back to your day. From the world of enterprise IT, take care.
Thanks for coming.